Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Just Saying Football with Jack and Sean. I'm your host, Sean Gannon, alongside my partner, Jack and Nicholas. We're here to bring you news, notes, weekly updates, and game analysis of your favorite teams from around the league. Now, the chance, go check out our website, justsayingfootball.com. Follow us on Instagram at JustSaying, for article and video updates. And don't forget to get us in your ears on Spotify at Just Saying Football. Big week one. I was at the Giants game. Sorry, buddy. Vikings won. Weird week one as well with some of these wins. Saints blowing out the Panthers. We're in week two. It's good vibes for the most part. Are you ready for this week?
Yeah, I'm ready for this week. Definitely a great week one. A lot of reactions that we'll get into as we cover these games. But, like you mentioned, a lot of weird games. We saw Dallas as underdogs blow out Cleveland. We saw Baker Mayfield playing like an absolute champ. There was a lot of different interesting things. Joe Burrow and the Bengals falling at home to the Patriots. So I'm very excited for week two because you never know what's going to happen in the NFL.
Yeah, and we're going to jump right into it with some of our blowout games of the week. And first on the list, we have the Las Vegas Raiders making their way to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Ravens are favored in this one by -8.5, over under here of 43.5. Obviously, the Ravens are coming off of that brutal loss where they lost by literally just a toe. What are your thoughts going into this game?
Yeah, definitely. Me and you were just talking about him off camera, but Isaiah Likely 11 catch game last week. Everyone was asking right before Mark Andrews' birthday, where is this guy? But it wasn't his day. Lamar looking like vintage Lamar, rushing for over 122 yards last week. Do you think we can expect the same this week? I'm going to go with the Ravens, just saying. But it's the Vegas definitely showed a little fight last week. But it's going to be interesting. What do you think? Do you think Lamar can kind of recreate that magic this week?
I'm locking in the Ravens for sure. I think Mark Andrews is going to get a little bit more involved. Of course, I think you can't not take Isaiah Likely for granted anymore. I think he has to be a part of this playbook consistently, as well as Mark Andrews. So they're going to have their work cut out for them, trying to figure out where they're going to move around these two tight ends to throw off defenses as the season goes on. And hopefully we can build on this Lamar Jackson passing game. Harbaugh came out today. He said that he doesn't want to. They're not going to run Derrick Henry the way that they were running in Tennessee. So I'm very curious what this means in terms of this passing offense. They love to run it out of the shotgun and the pistol, which is not Derrick Henry's sort of forte. So I'm very curious how this is going to keep going. I'm for sure locking in the Las Vegas Raiders. That's really bad quarterback play that we were seeing last week from them. It's going to be a long one for the Raiders. Max Crosby got a sack, and he'll keep doing that. So they got to watch out.
So you said you're locking in the Raiders?
No, I'm locking in the Ravens.
Oh, Ravens. You said the Las Vegas Raiders.
And then I wanted to say just something nice about the Raiders, which is Max Crosby, because honestly, I love you, Devontae, but I think you got to request a shape, bro. Go to a championship winning team.
I liked it.
Yeah,
what about the next game? Another blowout?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We got the Seattle Seahawks making their way to New England, taking on the Patriots. Seattle's serving this one by only -3.5, over under here at 41.5. What are your thoughts? I'm locking in Seattle. I kind of think that week one game was a little bit of a fluke on the Patriots' part, not going to lie. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the Patriots definitely have a few balls bounce their way. And without Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in there, you have to ask, could the Bengals at full strength have taken them? I think they could have, but, the Patriots got the win. Now Seattle has to travel all the way up to New England, all the way across the country. And I did see, last week I said that Seattle was going to have a really big game against the Broncos. It wound up just being a 6-point game. I think they're going to have to make a bigger statement with the weapons they have this week. Right now, I think that, New England holding Cincinnati just to 224 yards of offense last week, they're going to try to do the same thing to Seattle. But I think Seattle will be able to pull out the win. And if they get ahead, they're going to win this game by way more than 3.5.
Yeah, absolutely. I do also want to say Ramondre Stevenson had a great game, 25 carries, 125, and a touchdown. I do also have something to say about the Bengals, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. It has to do with some of the offseason not issues, but when you don't train in the offseason, this is sort of what happens during week one, but we'll get into that because they're playing a great team later on. All right, let's keep this moving. The San Francisco 49ers making their way to Minnesota to take on my Vikings. 49ers favored in this one by -6.5, over here of 45.5. Sam Darnold playing his former team. All right.
Yeah.
Forget that. What are your thoughts going into this one? Minnesota won this game last year, although Jordan Addison not going to be in this game. He scored a huge touchdown going into this We also did have Kirk Cousins, so his team's a little bit different. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking for Sam Darnold to look as comfortable as he was last week against the Giants. Starting the game, 14 of his first 14 throws, he completed 13 of them. And it's going to be a little bit tougher of a task with the 49ers. We obviously saw them last night taking on the Jets and, applying a lot of pressure. And I think that they're going to try to do the same thing, just try to make Darnold uncomfortable. It's going to be interesting to see if CMC plays after not playing on Monday. But if not, you know that Jordan Mason, who had 28 carries for 120 yards and a touchdown last night, he could be a big problem. But big shout out to Aaron Jones last week. He was holding it down for the Vikings and he got an awesome touchdown. But San Francisco, I'll take them by 6.5 here. They are just one of the best teams in the NFL.
I'm not going to take him by the 6.5, but I will take the money line. I also do want to say for anybody that's interested in the Vikings offense for fantasy wise, with Sam Darnold and is not interested in or doesn't have Justin Jefferson, probably looking for Jalen Naylor. He scored the touchdown in the game against the Giants. He's probably going to enter in now as the wide receiver 2 if Jordan Addison is out and is trending like he's not going to be. So just keep that in mind. Vikings, sadly, I'm so sorry. It's not going to be our weekend. 49ers are going to take this. They are the best team in the NFL. All right, let's keep this moving along because it's a Sunday night football game that we have in this blowout category when the Chicago Bears make their way to Houston to take on the Texans. Now, the Houston's favored this one by -5.5, over under here of 46.5. Caleb is the first rookie quarterback who's drafted number 1 to win since 2001 when David Carr was drafted. Now, not his best game of his career yet that we're probably going to see. Under 100 yards, under 50% completion, I believe. What are your thoughts going into this second game? Obviously, special teams and defense for Chicago was electric last week.
Yeah, they're going to need the exact same thing. They're going to need all three phases of the ball to be on top of their game if they're going to beat Houston in Houston. We saw Houston go toe to toe last week with the Colts. In the divisional matchup, that was probably one of the better games of the week last week. And I was saying that the Colts could come behind on Houston. We don't know what they're going to look like. Now we do. We know that Houston is a complete team, and at home in prime time, this is an absolute blowout for me. I think the Bears defense is good, and I've heard a lot of stories about how good they are. But when you talk about the connection you already see with Diggs, you already have Nico Collins there. We can name all the weapons all day, but I mean, Joe Mixon last week, leader in rushing yards for the entire week with 120 on the ground, 130 on the ground. I mean, he definitely fits into this offense, and the Bears are still trying to figure it out in my mind. So Houston 5.5, no problem for me.
I do also want to say I'm locking in Texans for sure. It's the first away game for Caleb. I think it's going to be a tough game, especially with how this defense goes. Daniil Hunter has a lot of familiarity with the Chicago offensive line, been playing them for a long time throughout his career, something to keep in mind. With Houston, though, I think what you love to see, Mixon was getting fed, had a great game. Diggs had his 2 touchdowns. Collins went off for 100 yards. I think if this is the floor of what this team can do in week 1, that ceiling is awfully high as this season continues and as they begin to mesh more and more and defenses give them different looks because this team is loaded. I'm very curious to see how this offense progresses as the season goes on. Great week 1 for them. Absolutely love it. Let's keep us moving along. So the Indianapolis Colts making their way to Green Bay to take on the Packers. Indianapolis favoring this one by -2.5, over under here of 41.5. Jordan Love avoided season-ending injury, just an MCL sprain. Packers fans, 3 to 4 weeks, and then he'll be back. That's great news considering the first loss. As we begin to get in early in the season, 0-3, 1-3 starts don't lead to the playoffs most times in the NFL. So you don't want to get into that hole. Malik Willis enters in as the quarterback. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, Malik Willis, you were just saying about Jordan Love, 3 to 4 weeks. Some people are saying that if he gets into that 6 to 8 week window with recovery, this season for the Packers could be completely for naught. And they're going to have to really make a statement here at home. We saw Josh Jacobs get signed to a huge deal this offseason. They're definitely going to lean on him a lot this week. And, if the rest of the weeks, when you look at the Colts last week, we were just also talking about their shootout with Houston. I've seen a lot from different quarterbacks coming in, but you wouldn't believe that Anthony Richardson has played as little of football as he has, and he is as good as he is. I think he has another amazing week. It is a 2.5 spread, but we always talk about how these games can be completely interesting. These 2.5 spreads, you don't know if they're going to end by a field goal or they could be a blowout. I think this is a complete blowout here. Malik Willis is going to be dependent on Watson and Dobbs and Reed, who shout out had the most yards by anybody of any receiver last week with 138. But when you got guys like Anthony Richardson, JT scoring on the ground, you can do a little bit of everything when you can also throw 60-yard touchdowns. So give me the Colts over 2.5, by 2.5, no problem.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. When you look at those 250+ yard throws for touchdowns that he has, it's why they drafted him. Only 17 games played in his career leading up to this, and this is why you go after him. He was electric in the combine. He was electric in college. You go after and get him. I am worried about the Packers, just like you mentioned, as you get in that 6 to 8 week frame. The NFC North is a very weird division. Detroit looks like they're going to be Detroit this season, but with the Bears 1-0 start and the Vikings 1-0 start, it just makes these first 4 weeks a little bit unusual to me. I'm locking in the Colts in this one. I think what they're able to do on the ground game, like you just said, what they're going to be able to do in the passing game with Anthony Richardson, this team is built for this offensive success. Packers are going to have to rely on their run game and their defense. They got to go back to the bread and butter. We're talking old school ground and pound football, baby. That's what they're going to have to do. Matt LaFleur is going to have to be creative. So it's going to be tough, especially in this first week. And it's not common that they're not favored at home, So this is an unusual one. So I couldn't agree with you more. Let's keep us moving along. So the LA Chargers making their way to Carolina to take on the Panthers. LA's favored this way -4.5, over under here of 39.5. Carolina, I don't know what that performance was.
I mean, they do not demote teams in the NFL, but if they did regulate teams, this would be the first one that they did. And, Sean, you put out, the Bryce Young 200 yards. I would have thought last week that honestly was a good play because you think, oh, even if they're down by a lot, he's going to be throwing a lot. And boy, did this guy make it look hard to throw the football. And the Chargers that I was talking the most about last week out of anybody on the episode, actually played a pretty decent game. So I'm going to go with the Chargers. And it's just because their run game's good and the other team sucks. But what are you taking, Chauncey? Give the people a good point on why they got to be taking the Chargers this week.
I mean, Joe Alt looks to be the future of that offensive line. That was great. We were talking about this earlier. We saw a nice breakdown of his game film last week against Max Crosby. It was absolutely electric. It's what you want to see out of your rookie in week one. Look, good offensive line. Herbert looked comfortable throwing in the pocket. That was a divisional game. That was great. You and I were both fully on the Raiders train in week one. Didn't work out. I'm worried about Carolina and everything that's going on in there. I don't know what's happening. You can't look. I know that this. I think week one was like the lowest average yards for quarterbacks. It was like 194 was like the average this week. It's sure the game has changed, absolutely, but like if you can't hit 200 yards and you're losing in that capacity, that is something. Things are not okay.
Yeah.
So I think panic button is full on in Carolina. I don't think there's a question about it. I'm locking in the Chargers without question. I think Dobbins is going to have a great game. The only concern, obviously, is with his injury history. From a fantasy perspective, how long will this last? Obviously, they have Gus Edwards, great Baltimore running back, OG as well, from his heydays with J.K. Dobbins. But let's keep this moving along. So we have our Mac category. And our first game up here is interesting. So we have the Atlanta Falcons making their way to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. This is the Monday night football game. Philadelphia's favoring this one by -5.5, over under here of 48.5. I'm just going to come out and say it. Kirk Cousins was underwhelming in his week one performance.
Yes, he was.
Said.
Sean's like, there is my shit talk of Cousins for the week. Well, I will talk that for you. Because outside, when the only thing going right in the offense is a Kyle Pitts touchdown, hell is freezing over because this guy gets his number one receiver one pass the entire game. And and he's trying to convince me that you got a guy you just drafted in the first round. And I know I don't want to start the Michael Penix crap already, but a team like the Eagles is not going to help people get convinced that Atlanta's offense is where it should be. I mean, the Eagles are going to smack them in the mouth last week. And I was watching film on Kirk all morning, looking at these dropbacks, and he is going to take some time to get back to that speed. But I mean, it's just crazy when you can see that he's struggling and you got his insurance policy right there. But give me the Eagles. This is prime time Kirk Cousins, and I don't need any more else when I know where I'm putting my money.
Yeah, I'm absolutely locking in the Eagles. I just think it's a better defense overall. What we saw at week one. Yeah, and the Kyle Pitts touchdown was great. He had 26 yards though. Like
Yeah.
it's from a fantasy perspective, that's 8 points. The tight end position outside of Isaiah Likely was a little weak in week one. Like, sure, it's fine, but it's a lot of offseason hype. Really underwhelming week one for Atlanta. Like he's coming back from an Achilles, totally reasonable. Like we just saw from Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers, it takes time. It's going to take some time. Let's see what happens because you got Drake London, you got Kyle Pitts, you got Bijan Robinson, who played a great game, will continue to have a great season. But like, let's see what happens. It's not the game that they want. I'm locking in the Eagles for sure. All right, let's keep this moving along. I think Cleveland Browns making their way to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. Jacksonville's favorite in this one, -3.5. Over under here, 43.5. Browns were just blown out last week.
Yeah.
Um, I like there. If you follow football, I don't even need to talk about Deshaun Watson because every outlet has just been going off on him. So you've been seeing it nonstop. So everything they've said, copy and paste and fine. It's whatever. I agree.
I think that it's like what Big Cat said the other day. You know, Deshaun Watson is so bad now at football that he may be a better human being than a football player. And I felt that because you watch him actually play football and you know he's big and you're like, wow. It's and you can see around him, right? Nobody around him, you know, he doesn't talk to people on the sidelines. He's not involved really. He's just there getting paid at this point. So I do believe that he's washed. I do believe he could be, you know, if somebody's willing to pay for this, you know, liability of a contract, you know, he could be something on the move. But, you know, people are calling for Jameis to get started. I will say with Jacksonville, Brian Thomas Jr., definitely want to mention him on the other side. I think he will be one of the X factors for me and why I think Jacksonville is going to win the game because Brian Thomas Jr. is special and he showed it off a lot last week. Christian Kirk was a little underwhelming. Evan Ingram was a little underwhelming. ETN got a touchdown. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are definitely going to have the right weapons. And their defense, you know, held Miami to a really good start. It's just very hard to keep a team like Miami down for that long. But give me Jacksonville at home this week, no problem.
I'm also locking in Jacksonville, but I just did some very quick research and shout out over the cap for just being so helpful on this.
Yeah.
With Deshaun Watson's contract, if they were to like just outright cut him right now, and
How
be
much
like,
is
oh
it?
yeah, this is a great move, $200 million in dead cap. If you trade him, it's $107 million in dead cap. And if you were to trade him post June 1st, that's when you finally get down to like $26 million in dead cap. I'm not even going to go into the other years, which have insanely high numbers of dead cap, but Cleveland is locked in to Deshaun Watson until this contract is actually over, or he continues to fake injuries until the end of the season. Go Jags. It's Duval City for sure. I'm moving on to the next game.
And for the people, though, by the way, who don't know what dead cap is, it's pretty much what happens when the Joker puts all the gasoline on that money in that movie. And you just know you just are going to have that less amount of money for your team. So, yes, screw that guy. Next game.
200 million. Next game, we have the New York Jets making their way to Tennessee to take on the Titans. Jets are favoring this one by -4.5. Over under here, 42.5. What are your thoughts going into this game? Jets Monday Night Football performance was rough. I think a lot of that hopefully was just Rodgers getting the rust off and this team maybe getting the rust off from the offseason. But Titans had the lead, lost it, bad interception by Levis, led to the infamous hand on the heads, on the knees. Weird Mayo commercials, by the way. But what are your thoughts going into this game?
You know, I think that, you know, I was talking to a friend earlier today, and he was talking about Tyrod Taylor's drive at the end, and I went back and kind of watched that drive this afternoon, and I was like, wow, you know, he actually went off. That was like probably the best we saw of the Jets offense. But I do think the Titans are a little bit more favorable of a matchup for a guy like Aaron Rodgers in this situation than the San Francisco 49ers in prime time. I think that, taking it to Tennessee, they're going to run the heck out of Brees Hall and just try to keep the ball out of the Titans' hands. That's where the Titans were most dangerous last week when they were running the ball. Sean, you hit the under yesterday on Garrett Wilson. I think this week he needs to be more involved.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson needs to be more involved. I don't think it's even a matter of question. And I think what Alan Lazard is going to have a good season because Aaron Rodgers just knows him so well. We saw it last night. The Lizard King strikes again.
Yeah.
But I think what you're missing from New York, and again, this is what one of our friends said, and I absolutely agree. They're missing a true wide receiver two right now. When you don't have that wide receiver two that can sort of take away some of the attention from your
Yeah.
guys like Garrett Wilson, that's where this will get hard. That being said, Garrett Wilson is a dog. He'll have his 100-yard games. He's going to go off for his touchdown games. I'm not worried about what he's going to do this season. This is a get right game for the Jets. This is a get right game in all phases of it. It was not good offensively. It was not good defensively as well. We're going to talk a little bit about it. Well, we didn't get to talk. Well, you mentioned a little bit ago with Jordan
Yeah.
Mason. It just wasn't good for the Jets outright defensively as well, which is their bread and butter. It's the backbone of this team they've relied on. I'm absolutely going to take New York in this one. For me, I'm a little bit worried about Will Levis. I kind of talked about it a little bit towards the end of last season and a little bit in the offseason. I'm not sure if he is the guy for Tennessee or if he's just sort of going to be this bridge guy until they find their true guy. And that first week performance wasn't what you want to see,
Yeah.
especially interception. I think this will be a get right game for the Jets. I like this.
I like
Moving
the
it
Jets
right
too. Let's get it.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, you're fine because you don't want to talk about this. That's why. So we have the New York Jets making their way to Washington to take on the Commanders. Washington's favored in this one by -2.5, over under here of 42.5. Take it away, Jack.
Yeah, man. The Giants are just a disaster. I mean, I'm going to say to everybody what they're seeing. As you said, there's so many storylines that are circulating. Even if you're not in New York, you know that the Giants had the worst weekend possible, that Daniel Jones has been getting heckled on everything he can, and rightfully so. I mean, the defense could have showed up a little more, but it's hard to ask a lot of that in the second half when your offense has already given up on you. I think that at the end of the day, the Giants just have to get better. They have to maybe even look at starting Drew Lock, but it looks like they're going for him this game. He has a great record against the Commanders, and it's a team that he's actually been able to play with. But they're going to need to get Malik more involved than him getting 5 for 66. If they really want him to be a number one receiver. On the other side, Jaden Daniels played a good game last week. It was just a Baker Mayfield literally had one of the best games of the entire weekend for a quarterback. But Jaden Daniels got to stop relying on his legs. You see him taking some hits just like we saw him take in college. That was my biggest worry going with the draft. But give me Washington this week. I just don't think the Giants have it figured out yet.
Yeah, I was at that Giants game. That was brutal. Not gonna say anything more. You summed it up. We talked about this nonstop, but I had Jaden Daniels as my number 2 quarterback on the board. I was a big fan of him. I loved him going to Washington. Was kind of hoping he might fall to Minnesota. Didn't obviously, but I agree. You can't be running that much. Dan Quinn came out today, was talking about it. We don't want to see your quarterback running 18 yards. We want to pass first. And I couldn't agree more. And it has nothing to do with size or anything like that. We've seen Kyler have his success, Russell Wilson have his success for a time being a smaller quarterback who ran the ball. But the point is that he's taking big hits still. We don't want to see that. We also don't want him running as much. You got Terry McLaurin out there. You got a good offense. Let's try to utilize these weapons. I'm locking in Washington. Whatever's going on in New York needs to be fixed. Let's see what happens as the season progresses. All right, moving this right along, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers making their way to Denver to take on the Broncos. Pittsburgh favored in this one by -2.5, over under here of 39.5. What are your thoughts on this one? Do want to say Justin Fields is going to get another start this week. Russell Wilson is still dealing with this calf injury, something to monitor throughout the year. Potentially. No touchdowns were scored, which is always good for Russell Wilson. But it was a field goal day of 18 points.
I know you would have thought taking Russell Wilson out would have given you more touchdowns, and somehow they win the game without any touchdowns.
Brutal. Well, what are your thoughts in this game? Bo Nix, I wouldn't say had the worst performance, but there was a few things that you want to take back. Obviously, throwing in a triple coverage, Cortland Sutton, not what you want to see. But it's a rookie. These are rookie mistakes. I think you can still hopefully maybe move things along. Not the performance maybe wanted out of your week one. How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Bo Nix, he did not have statistically the best week. He did have 42 pass attempts, which is a lot for a guy in his first game, 26 completions, but he's still only at 138 on the ground. And then when you look at the touchdowns, he has two interceptions. Not the best, we didn't expect a lot of the Broncos, but I will say I saw a lot of flashes from him last week where they needed to kind of keep the game close against Seattle, and they kept it right within six, right at the spread. I think Denver at home, they always play a little better at home. Justin Fields, he played fine just as well. I think this is like we're already getting into the theme. This is probably going to be a lot of sloppy QB play, very heavy defense. That's why the over under is 39.5. I'd still take the under on that. It'd be a heck of a sweat, but give me Denver at home. My roommate is Steelers fan is going to kill me, but I want to shake it up, and I think Bo Nix, he's going to have to air it out next week.
I'm not in the Steelers. It's defense. It's defense. It's defense. We just see it time and time again with TJ Watt, who immediately in week one is playing at a defensive player of the year
Yeah.
pace. So that's what we love to see here. Just saying, like you just mentioned, and I couldn't agree with you more. We saw the flashes from Bo Nix. That's great. Let's see what they can do as the season progresses. It's going to be another tough game. They do play a little bit better there. I'm expecting George Pickens to continue to have a great season. Despite scoring no touchdowns, he was heavily involved. He was Fields' go-to guy. That's exactly
Yeah.
what you want to see. I have him on my fantasy team, so I love that. So let's see how the season progresses for them. But I do like the Steelers. All right, let's move this right along because we now have our games of the week. And first up here, it's a playoff rematch. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers making their way to Detroit to take on the Lions. Lions are favored in this one by -6.5. Over under here of 48.5. What are your thoughts going into this one? Lions got the OT win last week, but it was against a maybe beaten up Rams team all of a sudden in the game with Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua. So what are your thoughts this week too?
Yeah, definitely made a huge impact with Puka and Matthew Stafford banged up. Puka out halfway through the game. Detroit's at home this week. Luckily, they don't have to go anywhere again. Tampa's traveling to them. But Baker had a huge day last week. 289 through the air, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Mike Evans, 2 touchdowns, I believe, or one. I mean, genuinely, when you look at the Bucs team, it just kind of looks like the team that we saw go deep in the playoffs a couple of years ago. But with this Lions team, they are even deeper. I mean, they have a little bit of everything to beat you. And now you're talking about Jameson Williams being able to take it off over top. Oh, we saw last week over 100 yards. Give me the Lions in this one. I don't see a team yet that can stop them, but this is absolutely going to be a scoring shootout. Give me the over on 48.5, no problem.
I was right about to start out being like immediately got to take the over on 48.5. I love what we saw from the Lions last week. I love what we saw from the Buccaneers. I have them winning the NFC South, which take that bet if it's still there to win for sure. But I think to your point, and I absolutely agree with it, the weapons that the Lions have and their ability to beat you in certain areas.
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs is out there. You got to worry about Jahmyr Gibbs. If Dave Montgomery's out there, you got to worry about Dave Montgomery. You got to worry about Amon-Ra St. Brown. You got to worry about Sam Laporta. You got to worry about Aiden Hutchinson. So like all these different guys, you got to start to worry about all these different ways that they're gonna to work around you. Wasn't Jared Goff's maybe his best performance in a Detroit uniform? This is a great week 2 opportunity up against a good Buccaneers defense. I think this is going to be a high scoring game. Buccaneers are going to be looking to try to get the win. They still have that taste of losing in the playoffs in their mouth for sure. But I'm locking in the Lions. They're at home. They don't need to go anywhere. The hype is real in Detroit. They're heavy favorites now to win the NFC North, especially with this Jordan Love injury. So they got to keep this win pace going. I love it. Let's keep this moving along to the Cincinnati Bengals making their way to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Kansas City is saving this one by -6.5, over under here of 47.5. What are your thoughts going to this one? This is Burrow versus Mahomes. It's everybody's favorite.
Yeah, you look at the 6.5 and you say it should be closer, but you still don't know how T. Higgins is doing. You still don't know where Jamar stands. I was thinking the main thing for me here is, Chase limited last week. Is he going to be limited this week? Or is he going to, is that loss for the Pats or even like his hate for the Chiefs just going to help him sign and play the full game? Because we know what an X factor he is. And now you look at Kansas City. This isn't the team last year where they're trying to figure out their number one receiver. You see Xavier Worthy get a freaking huge touchdown and then another one, and you're thinking to yourself, well, he's going to be the guy outside of Kelsey that Kansas City runs all their offense through right now while Marquise Brown comes back. Kansas City right now, they are looking like a full team to me, and the Bengals are not. I love the Bengals long term, but we've seen them struggle weeks 1 to 4 for the last 4 seasons in a row. I'm looking at Cincinnati right now, and I'm a little worrisome, so I'm going to take Kansas City in Arrowhead, no problem.
Yeah, I'm gonna lock in Kansas City, like you just mentioned. Xavier Worthy, also Rashee Rice, 70 for 107 for 103. Those are the things that we love to see out of this offense. Are high flying again. I think what we saw from week one out of the Bengals is not going to be what we see out of week two. I think they're going to be a much better team going into this one. I think part of it, and I wanted to talk about a little bit during the Patriots, we'll talk about now.
Sure.
When when your guys aren't around all the time in the building and working all together, it throws off the groove a little bit. And don't get me wrong, Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to have a great season. Even when Jamar Chase is on a snap count, he's still getting you 6 and 62, which is not
Yeah.
bad. He's going to eventually it's all going to click. T. Higgins is going to come back. I'm not worried about the Bengals for the long term. I think it's going to be a much closer game. I'm going to stay away from that spread without question at -6.5. So I would pay attention to this one. This is going to be a good. Let's see if the Bengals can get this offense rolling kind of game. Moving this right along, Thursday night football matchup. We got the Buffalo Bills making their way to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Miami's favored this one by only -1.5. Over under here of 50.5. Insane. Bills are 8-1 against Miami since 2020. What are your thoughts going into this game?
Yeah, I mean Buffalo, huge win last week against the Cardinals. You almost called a big one there, Shamji, saying about the Cardinals last week. If Kyler could have just hit Marvin Harrison, we'd be talking about the Bills pretty differently this week. But we're not. We're talking about how Josh Allen did Josh Allen things last week and kept the game completely within. They were very far, behind of 2 scores. And then at halftime, it seemed like they were kind of battling in together, and his 2 rushing touchdowns made a huge difference. One thing I want to point out is, Miami also with a comeback victory, you got to look and say, if it comes down to the wire, I can't really say that I would pick the Bills right now when it comes down. So I do think that they are going to have to come out here as underdogs and get the win. I think they are capable of that. Greg Russo got 3 sacks last week. Nobody else got 3 sacks. So I think that if they can make Tua uncomfortable, they can really get things going. And Tua, he had the most passing yards week 1 with 338 through the air. So, you're going to have to make him uncomfortable if the Bills are going to win this week.
I'm going to lean on Miami this week. I think both Javon Holland and Jalen Ramsey are dealing with respective injuries. But looking, they're still going to play in this game. For me, it's just that offense just kept rolling, didn't slow down. 130 yards and a touchdown for Tyreek Hill, 103 for Jalen Waddle. I think sky's only the limit. They got off to a slow start. This is week 2. They're at home again. Everything's just in the right vein for them to go off. Josh Allen doing Josh Allen things. So you're absolutely right. Let's see how this season continues because he's going to need to be doing that all year long. So if you're a fantasy owner, you better rejoice. But let's see if this offense can get going a little bit more passing as well as the season continues. All right, moving this right along. We have the New Orleans Saints making their way to Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Dallas is favored this one -6.5. Over under here of 45.5. Dak just got paid. CD just got paid. They just blew out the Browns in a game where Dak didn't even need to throw 200 yards. What are your thoughts going into this game?
I mean, both of these teams really made the team they played last week look like fools. And we were talking about the Panthers and we're talking about the Browns earlier in the show and how they just came up so short and disappointed. And now you got the teams that blow them out, and you say to yourself, well, if those are blowouts and they were flukes, now you got these guys proving against each other right now. And whoever comes out here, there's going to be a legitimate threat in the NFC. There's a lot of questions for both of these teams. You're playing in Dallas. You're playing on, the Americans game of the week. But last week, you have a lot of, defensive hustle from both these teams, and both the offenses played fine. So you have to wonder, which defense is going to step up more. I would hope it's New Orleans in my Giants fan club. I will say the Dallas defense played unbelievable last week. DeMarcus Lawrence and our Kendricks 2 sacks last week. So you got to think to yourself, can Kamara and Olave match with, what Zeke and CB are doing right now?
Yeah, that's that Mike Zimmer defense, baby, just showing out in Dallas. He's the defensive coordinator out there. Had some words for former general manager Rick Spielman a couple days before the game, which is just kind of fun. I'm looking at the Cowboys in this one. I think you summed it up best. These two teams had kind of weird games. They played really bad teams overall right now. Sadly, the Browns are looking like we're right back into 2012, which is not what you want to be saying after they were just in the playoffs a couple years ago. But for me, I think Dallas at home. It's a first game back. They're coming off this huge win. Fans are going to be there. You're going to get that video, of course, of everybody running into the stadium for week one. So get ready for that on Sunday. I'm going to lean with America's team question mark on if they're truly America's team going into this one against the Saints. Let's keep this moving along. So we have one more final game when the LA Rams make their way to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Now, this is a interesting game. Depending on where you're looking at different books, it's kind of even. Some books are saying it's the Cardinals at -1.5 or 2. Some books are saying it's the Rams at -1.5 or 2. So straight up, Vegas doesn't know. So let's jump into this game because it's kind of an unusual game when Vegas doesn't know like this. Obviously, Puka Nacua will be missing 4 weeks with an MCL sprain. We heard about the knee injury in the offseason. Seemed like everything was going well. Was having a good start to the game. Couldn't play through it. He is on the short-term IR. What are your thoughts on this one? I think the Cardinals really kind of showed out in week one, minus Marvin Harrison Jr.'s performance at 1 reception for 4 yards and the obvious missed wide open chance for the win.
Yeah, well, what I really loved last week was the way that, you saw Matthew Stafford kind of fight. You saw him get a little banged up last week, but there was no way he was getting out of that game in Detroit. Cooper Kupp is back, people. It's 2021 again. Sean was saying about the Browns, how it's 2012. It's 2021 for Cooper Kupp. He is back. He is here to dominate. 14 catches over 100 yards and a touchdown last week. You got to give it up for him. He kind of stepped up with Puka out. Going to be a big, issue for him out. But I will say Kobe Parkinson stepped up really well last week, the tight end for LA. And we saw a really good tight end performance out of Trey McBride the other day. So, these are going to be two quarterbacks relying on their security blankets. And a lot of defensive question marks for both these teams. For the Rams, it's can Braden Fisk and Jared Verse kind of, fill that Aaron Donald hole? And on the other side, can, Arizona stop Cooper Kupp? Can they stop Matthew Stafford? Can they stop Kyron Williams? Because if they can run James Conner all day. I want to pick the Cardinals. They're at home. This is a division rival. But give me Los Angeles. There's no way this team is going to fall to 0-2. And the Cardinals, I do believe that they are good, but Matthew Stafford has not had a problem with them so far since he's been on the Rams.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to also lock in the Rams on this one. I do like what we kind of saw from the Cardinals at times. I think what you're for sure going to see is a huge reliance on James Conner throughout the season. We're talking, he had 16 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown. He was involved in the passing game with 3 receptions for 33 yards. That's going to be consistent. I want to see Marvin Harrison emerge into this wide receiver 1 role. I think that's what this offense is just really missing. They kept it very close. We're all waiting for it. We all want to see it. Not only because he was drafted high, but because he is a great wide receiver. Exactly. That 1 reception, that wide open pass is missed. These are things. This is kind of the reason why you draft a guy like this. So I do want to see that get going. He's going to go up against Tre'Davious White, who's a solid cornerback. So that'll be a tough matchup. I do think that if he can start to get going, this offense will begin to change a little bit and begin to get a little bit more fun than what we've kind of seen over the last couple years. Yeah. But overall, I'm going to take the Rams in this one. I love what we're seeing out of Cooper Kupp. You're right. It's 2021 all over again. It's great. Matthew Stafford is slinging it around to anybody and everybody. I think Sean McVay is going to cook up a nice little offensive plan with no Puka this week and trying to figure out how he's going to utilize his other weapons and Kyron Williams, get him involved again. He had a great week last week. Yeah. Sorry, Arizona. I love you guys. I think that they're going to be solely on the come up in the couple of years, but this game is going to be your game.
And if we're wrong about the Rams, it's not our fault because Vegas is wrong too because nobody has any idea who's going to win this game.
All right, nobody knows. It's not our fault. Very unusual that something like this is happening. It has to be because of the injury to Puka is what I'm leaning
Yeah.
towards. Unless they know of something else that we don't know about, like a Matthew Stafford injury. But I don't think that's going to be the case. No, I hopefully also no last minute. Oh, we benched him on, or he was already starting on Friday, but we released it an hour before the game. Kind of vibes this week, in terms of fantasy. But that's all the time that we have. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you everyone for checking this out. Enjoy this weekend.
Yeah, enjoy it. Week 2. We're already at week 2. The season's already going too fast. Thank you guys for checking this out. Remember what Chauncey said. Spotify, YouTube, Just Saying Football, Just Saying with no GWJS. And make sure to check out our Discord in our bio. Thank you guys so much for checking this out and enjoy this week of football.
Enjoy.